History is not a straight line. It is a series of parabolas. Every empire you see on a map today, no matter how permanent it feels, is currently somewhere on that curve. Most people believe that empires fall because of a single, catastrophic event, a lost war, a sudden plague, a barbarian at the gates. They are wrong. Those are merely the final taps on a glass that has already been shattered from within. Today, we are performing a necropsy on the dead giants of history, from Rome to the Ottomans, from the British Empire to the Soviet Union. We are analyzing the 7 levels of fallen empires. We will explore how complexity becomes a trap, how the age of affluence silences the voice of duty, and how a nation eventually loses the one thing it needs to survive: the will to exist. The clock is ticking. The curve is bending. Welcome to the archive of the fallen. This is the echelon. At the first level, the collapse begins with a whisper. It is the level of complexity overhang. As a society grows, it solves problems by creating institutions, new laws, new departments, new layers of management. For a century, this works. But eventually, the cost of maintaining the bureaucracy exceeds the benefit it provides. This is what Joseph Tainter called diminishing returns on complexity. The empire becomes a machine that consumes all its fuel just to keep its gears turning. Farmers are taxed into poverty to pay for regulators who do nothing but write more regulations. Innovation dies because the standard operating procedure is more important than the result. At level 1, the nation is still wealthy, but it is becoming brittle. It is a giant with a clogged heart. But even a bloated giant can survive, as long as it believes in its mission. That changes at level 2. Level 2 is moral erosion. Sir John Glubb identified this as the transition from the age of commerce to the age of affluence. In the beginning, an empire is built by pioneers, men who are hardy, aggressive, and self-sacrificing. They value honor and duty above all else. But as wealth pours in, the values change. The children of the pioneers don't want to build, they want to consume. Fame is replaced by celebrity. Duty is replaced by self-interest. The society becomes obsessed with frivolity, sex, and entertainment. The hero is no longer the soldier or the explorer, it is the performer. At level 2, the elite become insulated. They live in gated communities and believe that the good times will never end because they have forgotten the hard times that made them possible. Level 3 is where the math stops working. This is fiscal insolvency. When an empire can no longer pay for its bureaucracy and its military through production, it turns to the printing press. It devalues its currency. In Rome, it was the debasement of the denarius, reducing the silver content until the coin was just copper dipped in silver. Today, it is the digital equivalent, quantitative easing, and endless deficit spending. At level 3, the empire is living on borrowed time and borrowed money. It must expand just to pay interest on the debts of the past. Inflation begins to eat the middle class alive. The social contract starts to fray because the money people earn no longer buys the life they were promised. The nation is now a house of cards, waiting for a breeze. Level 4 is identity collapse. This is when the universal idea that held the empire together dies. Every great power needs a shared story. For Rome, it was Romanitas. For the British, it was the civilizing mission. For the Americans, it was the dream. When that story breaks, the people stop being a nation and start being a collection of tribes. Internal schisms emerge. The left fights the right. The city fights the country. The native fights the immigrant. Instead of collaborating to fix the sinking ship, political factions fight over who gets to hold the steering wheel as it hits the rocks. At level 4, the enemy is no longer them across the border. The enemy is us across the street. A house divided against itself cannot stand, and the neighbors are starting to notice. Level 5 is military ossification. This is the level we analyzed in our earlier briefings. The military, once an unstoppable force of pioneers, becomes a paper shield. It is top-heavy, with generals and light on combat-ready soldiers. The equipment is expensive, but over-engineered and difficult to repair. The soldiers are no longer motivated by a sense of duty, but by a paycheck. Most importantly, the military becomes defensive-minded. They stop looking for new worlds to conquer and start building high walls to keep the world out. As Rome grew older, the earthworks of their camps became high stone walls with narrow gates. They stopped counterattacking. They became passive. When a military loses its aggression, it is only a matter of time before someone more desperate and more hungry tests the gates. Level 6 is the external shock. This is the part people remember. The Vandals sacking Rome, the fall of Constantinople, the retreat from Saigon. But notice where this sits on the ladder. It is at the top, not the bottom. The Barbarians, whether they are literal tribes or rival superpowers, only ascend because the levels below have already failed. They don't win because they are technologically superior. They win because they are cohesive. They have the pioneer energy that the Empire lost 3 centuries ago. They see the debt, they see the schism, they see the paper shield. They realize that the giant is hollow. Level 6 is the moment of contact. It is the first time the Empire is asked to pay a price it can no longer afford. The borders collapse. The colonies declare independence, and the center loses its grip. Finally, we reach level 7, systemic reversion. This is the Dark Age. Collapse is not just a change in government. It is a loss of complexity. The trade routes stop. The global reserve currency becomes worthless. The satellites go dark because no one can afford to replace them. The population shrinks because the industrial food system that supported millions can no longer function. People move back to the land. Cities become quarries for stone to build local fortifications. Literacy rates drop. The grand strategy of the past is forgotten, replaced by the local survival of the present. At level 7, the Empire is gone. It becomes a legend, a story told by people living in the ruins of a civilization they can no longer understand. So, where are we today? Look at the levels. Are we adding complexity to solve problems that complexity created? Level 1 is our culture obsessed with frivolity and the self over duty. Level 2 is our debt reaching a point of mathematical impossibility? Level 3, are we a nation or a collection of tribes who hate each other? Level 4, the ladder of collapse is not a suggestion. It is a law of nature. Entropy always wins, unless a society has the courage to do the one thing that is almost impossible: to simplify, to jettison the values that no longer work, to pay the debts, and to rediscover a shared mission. History is a graveyard of empires that thought they were exceptional. They weren't. Neither are we. In our next briefing, we go to the level 7 players of the modern age, the silent superpower, how the deep state really functions. This is the echelon. We are the watchmen. We are the architects. If you want to survive the curve, you have to understand it. Subscribe to the archive. I am reading your comments below. Which level do you think your nation is currently standing on?